Forum Communications Company is proud to be a part of the Trust Project. Learn more at thetrustproject.org. Hey folks, before we get started, I just wanted to tell you, you can unlock unlimited access to political news, commentary, opinion, and a whole lot more at inforum.news/port for only 99 cents a month for your first 3 months. Hurry, get this limited time offer at inforum.news/port now. This podcast is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. Welcome to Plain Talk, and hey, you know what's weird? We're in primary season, and so in North Dakota, especially in the legislature, we've been talking about this. We have a lot more primaries than we normally do. I think in a normal year, we maybe have 4 or 5, maybe half a dozen. This year, we have 21, just among Republicans, and then there's 3 contested Democratic races as well. So that's a lot going on. But what's interesting to me about it is not a lot of these races are focused on actual policy. Right? I mean, there's usually a lot of platitudes about, well, I'm super conservative, or I'm more conservative. I'm even more conservative. I'm the super conservative. I'm the ultra conservative. But people aren't talking about policy, which is why it caught my eye when Roscoe Streyle, he's a candidate for the State House in District 3, and has been in the state legislature before, served a couple of terms previously. He put forward a property tax plan. And not just kind of a toss it out there, let's do something about property taxes, but an actual plan. Here with me to talk about that today, along with my Wednesday co-host Chad Oban, is Roscoe. Roscoe, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Tell us about your plan. Give us the details.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. 50% cut on all residential pieces of property in the state of North Dakota. It amounts to a $250 million per year plan, $500 for the biennium, and it's just directed at residential property. Obviously, there's ag property, there's pipelines, there's commercial, but this is a targeted approach directly to residential property owners.
Roscoe, how do you pay for it?
Right now, obviously, with the high commodity prices, inflationary environment, funds up the buckets in the state of North Dakota quite well, just because of the way our economy is. Currently, under current state law and how the oil funding formula is, there's $200 million sitting in a fund right now called the Tax Relief Fund. I propose to use the $200 million of that. There is $205 million in the SIF fund, another unobligated amount that grows monthly. The general fund surplus as of April 2022 is 18% above budget, with 14 months left in the biennium, is $332 million, and our oil bucket oil revenue is $471 above projections. Now, granted, 70% of that goes to constitutional funds, but if you gross all that up, it's over $1 billion in funding right now available, with 14 months left in the biennium. So I project under extremely conservative budgeting forecasting that we'll be over $2 billion in surplus come the end of the biennium. So to me, a $500 million cut is affordable, reasonable, and something I think the state should do.
Are you thinking that this would be permanent, or would it be just to get us through? I mean, obviously we've got some tough sledding right now with inflation and some of the other things going on. In your mind, is this permanent, or is this just in the moment? And if it's temporary, how do you protect against North Dakotans getting blasted again when the property taxes go back up in a couple years or however long it is?
Absolutely. Great question. As you know, the legislature meets every 2 years, so everything is 2-year temporary. I mean, I think this type of proposal could be put in the base budget is affordable. But as of rolling it out, it would be for the next biennium, the 2 years preceding or in that biennium cycle. But I do think it is an affordable option. If you look at the Common Schools Trust Fund, it's approaching 7 billion. The Legacy Fund approaching 9 billion. We're going to get to a point where those funds get so big that the interest alone is going to supplant general fund dollars for education, for example. And that's a great thing for the Common Schools Trust Fund. If that thing could pay just the interest for K-12 education, I mean, that is huge for the state of North Dakota, huge for the taxpayers. That, I think, helps fill the gap here going out into the future. The Legacy Fund, obviously, we know that thing is projected to grow 20, 30, 40 billion. Think about the interest that rolls off that. So I think we're maybe a 2 or 3 bienniums away from a large sustainable cash flow from those two funds, which would then replace a lot of the general funds that would be needed for various state government, actually. So to me, looking out, the future is bright, I think, for North Dakota, and I do think this is affordable. There is people that would like to see income tax eliminated, of course, or the funding formula for K-12 going down to 20 mils, let's say, or a cap on 20 mils versus the 80, and changing some of that. And I'm open to looking at those proposals as well, but I just think this one is a targeted one. We're in an inflationary environment that does really hit people in the pocketbooks. It's good for the state of North Dakota because of the commodities. So it's a weird conundrum we're in right now. Senior citizens on fixed income, food prices up, energy prices up, property taxes up. This is a way to help blunt that inflationary, and the state's benefiting from it. So why should we not try to give some of it back in a targeted approach?
So Roscoe, you brought up public education, and that's who I work for, advocate for public schools. And so when I originally saw this proposal, I thought to myself, well, what does this mean for K through 12? I also think that you and I probably look at the role of government a little bit differently. But the point of this podcast is to talk about things. And I think you and I both agree that we want public schools to be well-funded. And personally, I'd like our taxes to be as low as possible while still funding all the priorities that we have. So my concern, and you brought up inflation, is our schools are really being affected by inflation in a way that's slightly different than private sector, right? Private sector can raise their prices. Public schools, I've heard some districts who are going to need a 5% increase, 6% increase in state funding in order to just stay baseline because of the inflationary costs that they're dealing with. Is there a way to fund your property tax plan and still do what we need to do to help our public schools deal with the inflation they're dealing with? And we have a teacher recruitment crisis in the state, in the country, frankly. Can we do both of those things with this plan?
Yeah, I think so. And that's why, some people have said, well, it should be $1 billion. Like, you should eliminate income tax. That's $1 billion proposal per biennium. This is a $500 million proposal. So, I could say, oh yeah, I would just do more. I would do $1.5 billion, $2 billion. I give it, that's not prudent, I don't think, because we're in a commodity-based economy. Oil goes back down to 60, soybeans go to 6. I mean, are they going to? Probably not. But, you still want to be conservative in your budgeting here. So that's why I went with the 50% specifically to residential property. I think it's conservative, it's big, but it's affordable. So I don't think it takes away at all, actually. And with the Common Schools Trust Fund growing, just simple math on that, I mean, there's going to be so much money dedicated to education that the taxpayer essentially doesn't have to fund, through general fund, sales tax, et cetera, because of what was put in at statehood and the oil revenue that flows into that fund. I mean, if you just project it out 2-3 bienniums, I think the funding source for K-12 education is going to be here for decades and decades and decades to come. A stable, predictable, nice stream to be able to fund education. I'm a parent too. Like, I fully support education. I mean, it's one of the most important things in the state, and the state has an obligation to make sure that they're funded at the level that they should be funded at.
Let's talk about, because a decade ago now, in 2012, in fact, June of 2012, we had a statewide debate over a ballot measure that would have eliminated property taxes. And the argument that won, it went down in flames. I think the opposition got over 70%. It was 70% no.
Rob, you know why that is?
Why?
It's because I managed that campaign.
Oh, okay.
No
Well,
side,
I actually had forgotten that Chad Oban was victorious in killing that idea. And I think now, I supported it at the time. I think I've come around to the idea that eliminating it in that way probably would have been imprudent. That said, one of the arguments that the people like Chad made against this was the loss of local control. It was a lot of terrible nightmare scenarios about, superintendents having to come to the legislature on bended knee and beg for money. And yet this very much seems like where we're heading. Like since that measure failed, people continue to be upset about their property taxes, and the solutions coming from the legislature continues to be accumulating more of the property tax burden onto state revenue sources. So speak to the local control angle, right? I mean, voters were obviously very persuaded about that in 2012. Do we lose local control if we put something like this in the budget?
This piece, just the buy down, if you were to completely eliminate it, it's and including all special assessments. In 2020, there was almost $1.4 billion in property taxes paid. So double that, you'd need $3 billion hypothetically. That is a huge ask for the state of North Dakota. I mean, you're literally putting all of your eggs in the oil basket, more than we already are. I mean, it's easy to say that, I would just eliminate it. It'll create way more revenue to the state. I support reducing and reforming them at a reasonable level that the state can afford. Now, could the state do more infrastructure spending for cities, counties, which would then take the burden off property tax for that? Yeah. I mean, I love spending or investing money in infrastructure. That comes back 2, 3, 4-fold. So to me, or does the state change the sales tax funding piece? There is other areas, but in the end, you still got to play for police, fire, education. I mean, those don't go away. We need those. So you can't just say, well, we'll just eliminate everything. I mean, it's a good talking point, but practically it just doesn't work. And yeah, I don't know what would happen if the state funded 100% of a city. So now does the state control that? Well, if you're the banker or you're the money man, you have a lot of influence over that. It's just the reality of the situation. I don't like that. I would rather have local control. We complain about the federal government putting its finger on North Dakota, which it does, and I do not like that one bit. But then we want to turn around and do it from the state to the locals. It's just, you can't talk out of both sides of your mouth, and I just think that's what would happen. And I don't want that. And I certainly don't want a full-time legislature in North Dakota. And I think you would almost have to go to that point, honestly.
So I might have missed this, but the mechanics of the 50%, would it be giving money to local subs in order to buy that down, or is it giving money directly to the taxpayers to pay for their property taxes? How would this work?
So yeah, I looked at various options, and there is the tax piece through the tax department where you could potentially do it through the income tax return. But I chose to do, if you remember, 2015, I believe it was, I was in session when Al Carlson brought the 12% across all property in North Dakota. It would function similar to that, exactly like that actually, but only apply to residential. So the counties already have the mechanism in place. So the state the counties would report what the taxable dollar is for residential property. The state would drop the money down, spread it 50% across each property. So I think it's a simple deal to do. There shouldn't be any IT expense. There shouldn't be any outcry from the counties. They've already done this. It's a simple mechanism, I think.
How do it seems in the past when the state has reached down to essentially try to buy down local property taxes, one of the big problems has been backfill, which I explain, there's a relationship between what taxpayers are willing to pay before they'll begin to revolt and start electing other people, and what the government's going to levy as a tax. So let's say my threshold for paying is $4,000 a year in property tax on my home. You come and you buy that down 50%. Now it's $2,000. That leaves $2,000 that the local governments have that they can run up my property tax before I'm back at my threshold for paying again. How do you stop that from happening? The state comes in, moves some of that burden to the state revenues, but now the cities and the counties and the school boards and the park districts come along and they backfill. How do you stop that from happening?
That's a really valid concern, and that's something that's talked about all the time, especially when the state started getting into the property tax game with the education piece, social services take over the 12%, and now this. It has to be looked at as far as reform. Caps is a dirty word that takes away local control. I don't support just saying, hey, we're gonna manage your budget for the next 10 years for you. There should be some mechanisms. I don't have all the answers on what the reform piece should be to this, but I would look to include that in a proposal, working with the other legislators as far as is there good reform pieces that we could do for this. Does this get paired with an income tax package, a smaller income tax package? Not on this level, maybe, but so I think there's a lot of things going on that we could meld a really good tax relief plan together with reform. So that's something that is a concern. I've thought about it. It is something that would need to potentially be addressed, because I wouldn't want them just taking away the relief and say, well, it's only $300 more. It's only $500. Look at the cut you're getting. So you're actually still net down. I mean, that's the strategy that's been used in the past at some time. And we would have to definitely be cognizant of that, I think.
Roscoe, I'm going to shift us to politics in the next, 3 weeks until the primary election. So I was driving yesterday from Bismarck to Fargo, and I was driving through Valley City, and I saw a big Dwight Kiefert sign, Representative Dwight Kiefert, and I was on the phone with Nick Archuleta and Ryan Nagala from North Dakota United, and I said, I'm in Kiefert country. Who would have thought Dwight Kiefert would be the most sort of moderate person running in this district?
Hey, Chad was almost doing like air quotes with his eyebrows when he said that.
But it's the same as your district, Roscoe. I think I've said on this podcast before, what is going on when Roscoe is seen as this sort of establishment? I don't want to say conservative or not conservative, but the establishment guy. We had Jessica Bell on a couple of weeks ago. The idea that Jessica Bell is no longer seen as conservative. What is going on here? And what's your pitch to win on June 14th?
Well, to me, it's all about relationships. We all know it in life. Like, if you're mad and screaming and you're not going to have any friends, or if you're in business, you have to build relationships to get things done. You guys know that in the legislature. I know that in the legislature. Now, does that mean that we're going to agree on everything? Of course not. But I take an approach of, if I'm going to go down there, invest my time, energy on behalf of my constituents, my community, my state, I'm not just going to go down there and throw bombs. I've done that. I've done some of that. Yes. But
Roscoe has promised me he's not going to use Twitter this time.
Yeah, I don't have Twitter now. But you want to accomplish something, right? I mean, and I think my constituents are constituents. The state expects you to govern. It's easy to say, well, I'll vote no on everything. My opponent doesn't even belong to the caucus. Well, how are you going to get something done other than selfishly post on social media or selfishly promote yourself? How are you going to get something done if you don't even belong to the caucus? You don't have friends. I mean, obviously he's got some friends out there, but you're not going to accomplish nothing other than, collect some free health insurance and a small paycheck. Like, that isn't a reason to run for office. A reason to run for office is because you think you have a skill set that maybe can help the state and your constituents. And I think I do. I don't know everything. I got big gaps in what I know. But what I do know is the budget, and what I do know is working with people to get meaningful legislation done, balance, keeping the budget on track. Like, that's my forte. And that's what the approach that I would take is there people, do you get into arguments down there? For sure you do. But if you're going to accomplish something, you got to build relationships. You guys, I mean, we all know it. And they have chosen the opposite, to just beat their chest and say, well, I'm the best. I'm conservative. Listen to me. I'm 100% right on everything. Well, if you're a purist and you're 100% right on everything, good luck with your life or your business, because it's not going to be successful. We're
Ross,
all flawed and we all are not right on everything.
just to be clear, Roscoe's running in District 3. His opponents in the House race, Republican opponents in the Republican primary, are incumbent Representative Jeff Hoverson, who is who Roscoe was referring to, says he's part of the Bastiat caucus and not the Republican caucus. For people who don't maybe understand how this works, the two parties, they go down and they have caucus. They have meetings within their caucus where they discuss, what a Republican's going to stand for, what a Democrat's going to stand for. The caucus is sort of the organizing principle of the candidates from each party, the elected officials from each party. Hoverson has said he doesn't. Lori Van Winkle is the other candidate in District 3. And Roscoe, how do we? Because to me, that when you're saying that's really refreshing. And like you, I don't begrudge people getting passionate about this stuff, right? If you're not passionate about this stuff, then maybe you shouldn't be in office. And when you're passionate about things, sometimes it spills over. And I don't begrudge anybody that, right? Like passion, that's fine. Like you get a little upset, maybe you say something that's intemperate that you regret. I think as long as you own it, I think as long as you have some integrity about it, that is what it is. We're all human beings. There's nothing wrong with exposing your frailty now and then. But I agree with you. This idea that I'm 100% right and you're 100% wrong, and I think that is become endemic to politics, and it's what's killing us in a lot of ways. In that you go in there with that attitude, and then it's like, I'm not going to listen to the Democrats at all. They couldn't possibly. You just admitted you have a lot of gaps in your own knowledge. It could be that a Democratic official has some knowledge that could fill in some of those gaps. And maybe you won't ultimately agree with them on the policy that emerges, but at least you're listening to them. I mean, that's what I want out of an elected official.
Yep. Politics is an arena of ideas, and not every idea comes from your own brain. Like I've got all kinds of ideas. I've come up with some really dumb ones, some good ones here and there. It's just everybody getting together, figuring out what the best policy is for the state of North Dakota, for your district, your region. That's what it's about. We're all one big family here. Every election, I think in your actually rankings, I was tied for second and maybe fifth the one session and top 10 the other two. So I've been ranked, granted their rankings, whatever, but these guys like to throw these rankings around like they actually mean something.
The Rob Port ranking probably doesn't matter much to them anymore.
Yeah, probably not. But I mean, I was, so I am very conservative, but I am also, I think you got to use common sense too. Like getting things done and moving things forward, whether it's working with, colleagues in my caucus, the other caucus, the agency heads, the governor's office, like you all have to work together because in the end it has to pass both chambers and the governor has to sign it. That's how it works. It's pretty simple concept. But I'm not going to give up my principles either though. Like I'm not going to vote for a tax increase. I'm not going to vote on a pro-choice bill. Like I'm pro-life. So there's things that I agree with the Bastiat caucus, probably 85-90%. I was at the original meetings to that. The intent was not a bad intent at the beginning. It was a conservative movement. They've turned into not that right now. It's just as bad as the far left.
So Roscoe, I got to be honest. I almost feel like, when you were in the legislature, you weren't just conservative. You were also, I think I've used the term bombastic. You were outspoken on Twitter. You were very aggressive, used some terminology that was very offensive to people over the years. Don't be offended by this, but I almost sense like you've matured a little bit into the role as you've gotten a little older. Do you think that's fair? I mean, the way you're talking right now, compared to like your former Twitter persona, is very different. Can you
I'm
talk
40
about,
now. I'm over 40 now, I guess. I don't know.
That'll do it, man. That'll do it.
I would say that I haven't changed really at all as far as my beliefs. Maybe the approach that I have been taking, and I haven't done obviously much in 4 years. I haven't been all that involved in politics. Behind the scenes a little bit on a few issues with some of my former colleagues for MINOT, that we keep, moving MINOT forward in some of the flood issues or what they've needed help with at the chamber here. I've helped out there quietly. But I haven't really been involved. I've been raising my family, running businesses, working at my job. And it's just, I don't know. The fighting that's going on in this country, it's good, right? Because of open discussions, fine. But we've got to a point where, do you want to govern or do you not want to govern? It's so easy just to say you're this, that, and the other. But when you have a record, you got to run on that. And I've got a good record, I think, from my 8 years prior of getting things done, working with people, putting meaningful legislation forward. And that's what I intend to do. I just couldn't sit back anymore, honestly. And was embarrassed on the messages I would get from dozens and dozens of colleagues of mine saying, what is going on in District 3? Like, you guys have no credibility anymore. And I'm sitting here in Bismarck, not even my district, and I'm fighting for flood protection for you. And your own district could care less. So, I mean, to me, that's just, it's hurtful because I know I can make a difference. I have made a difference. And it's just like, all right, I got to step up again. I got to see if I can get back in here. My family was super supportive. My employer was very supportive. So I guess that's where we're at.
Well, Roscoe, I appreciate you coming on and talking about your tax plan. And again, I thought that was so refreshing. I mean, I spend all my time watching these races statewide. I was listing for Roscoe yesterday all the newspapers and stuff that I subscribe to because I try to follow all this stuff. And I'll tell you, not a lot of people out there talking about specific policy ideas. And that literally the thing that agree with it or not, literally what the campaigns are supposed to be about. Democrat, Republican, few people are talking about that. And I for kudos, at least for putting something on the table.
Ideas. Agreed. That's what it's about. Ideas moving forward, addressing the issues that we have in the state, and working together, and let's get it done. What's the best conservative policy we can?
Chad might not take the conservative part out.
Hey, listen, there's some political reality going on in this state that I've become much more pragmatic as I've gotten older. 40 was a few years ago, but
listen to all the young radicals on this podcast growing up.
Here's the deal. I just want to be able to have normal conversations. It's like when we had Jessica Bell on. I think she was wrong on most of the tax stuff she was talking about. But she and I can talk about it. Roscoe and I can talk about, holes that I see in this property tax plan. That's all I want. Even if I ended up not winning, just to be able to have a conversation with elected officials, it's a low damn bar these days.
It really is.
They should be available to the public. I'm as blunt as they get. I will give you my opinion, not sugar-coated, and we might not agree. Maybe we get into an argument, but hey, then we shake hands and say, hey, I'll see you at lunch. To me, that's what you should govern. And that happens in our own caucus. I remember getting into lots of screaming matches with my own colleagues. Then you shake hands, go have lunch, go have a beer, and go on to the next issue. You can't take politics personal. And I would say 75% of people, unfortunately, do. And that's, I think, our downfall really in this country is everybody takes everything so personal. Just don't take it personal. Move to the next topic. Maybe you'll agree on that.
Roscoe, thanks for your time.
Yeah,
good luck,
thanks,
Roscoe.
See you later.
We'll just finish up with Roscoe Streyle, and we're going to move on to some other topics. Big news in the state. In a moment, we'll talk about the group behind the measure to require a supermajority for constitutional measures. They didn't get their signature, so we could talk a little bit about the initiative measure process. I think we'd be remiss in not mentioning what happened in Uvalde, Texas. 21, I think, was the last body count that I saw. God, it's a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. And it's frustrating to me, Chad, because every time this happens, it's the same reactions, right and left. It's indignant outrage from the left that anyone who might, have some skepticism about red flag laws, they have blood on their hands and they're terrible people. And on the right, it's, they're coming for our guns, they're grabbing our guns. And even, I wrote a column just before we came on. I don't know that it's published yet as we record this, but it probably will be later today. Former lawmaker Luke Simons, who is proud of having been expelled from the state legislature. His Facebook profile says expelled and censored. This is something to be proud of. He's got a Facebook meme up where essentially he says, when midterms are coming up, turn on the mass shootings. It's all part of their narrative. If gun-free zones work, schools would be the safest place on the planet. I read that, Chad, and this stuff is hard enough to talk about without the idiots weighing in.
Yeah, and to just push back on Luke, there was an SRO that was there. I mean, there was a police officer that was in this school. So if that was as easy as it was to,
I don't think it is easy. I don't know how
Yeah.
it's not easy. Somebody who, and always after the fact, we can look back and say, oh, they were red flags because they acted weird or something. Okay. The problem is that in order to act on somebody, they have a right to due process. And it's hard to go in front of a court and say they're acting weird, deny them their rights. That's a high bar to get over. And it should be a high bar to get over. I don't know what the answer is to these things.
So I think, first of all, I mean, I can't get over last night and this morning thinking about those 19 families that brought their second, third, and fourth graders to school in the morning.
I was thinking that this morning as I'm sending off my kindergartner and my middle schooler to school.
Absolutely. And so what those families did, and then the two teachers who, it's my understanding, covered their students to save them, who ended up getting shot. So it's just hard to fathom. It's so emotional. What I would like us to, we have to do something. We have to do something. And I think as human beings, and I hope Luke Simons and people like Luke Simons can at least look at the humanity of this. Look at those babies that went to school and didn't come home that night. I mean, I don't know how you turn that into I almost used the F word. I apologize for that. Into a meme. I don't know, like, what's behind somebody who'd want to turn in the meme. So, Rob, I know that, like, on the red flag laws, there's a lot to it, but I think we should all be able to agree that we need to keep weapons out of the hands of people who we know are mentally unstable.
I am for that. I mean, I'm for that. I don't want anybody to be hurt. And I mean, listen, I grew up around guns all my life. My father was a cop and a soldier. One of my earliest memories of him is taking me out as a 6-year-old with a single action .22 rifle, teaching me gun safety, teaching me how it works, how to hold it properly, how to load it, how to check that it's unloaded, all of those things. I came from a gun background. I own guns myself to this day.
Right.
But I don't want people to be able to use them, for violence. I don't. What frustrates me is when this happens, everybody comes out and there's some policy idea, and this will be the silver bullet. We'll fund mental health. That'll be the silver bullet. We'll pass red flag laws. That'll be the silver bullet. And it's a mistake. There are no silver bullets. I don't know that there's anything specifically we can do.
Rob, every conversation we have, no matter if it's the, abortion issue or energy issue or whatever, every time we have these conversations, we both agree there's no silver bullet. There's no just one thing to solve these things.
Yeah. But
we have to start moving. For the life of me, I can't figure out why can't we get rid of huge, what's the word I'm looking for? The 30 bullet holders.
High capacity magazines.
Yeah, high capacity magazines. We had assault weapon bans in the past. And I would also just say the last time we looked at background checks, the bill was sponsored by Pat Toomey, a Republican from Pennsylvania who worked for Club for Growth, and Joe Manchin. There is a way to move this forward because the people in the middle, like Pat Toomey and Joe Manchin, are willing to have this conversation.
Yeah.
But we can't, again, go to just our sides and say, ban everything, ban nothing. And I'm a little frustrated with conservatives who, I'm hearing Roe v. Wade is overturned, so therefore abortion is done in this state. But we couldn't possibly look at banning any sort of weapon because the people will still get them. I mean, we don't say that we should legalize murder or sexual assault because people still do it, right? We're not going to eliminate all of these things, but we have to start taking steps.
Yeah.
And North Dakota is one of the only states that hasn't had a mass school shooting. It's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time.
That's terrible.
Until something like that happens.
Coming from the conservative perspective, I share your goal, but I struggle with, for instance, background checks. Well, this kid who shot up Uvalde, Texas would have passed a background check. He didn't have a criminal record.
But what if it would have stopped? I mean, no, as you said earlier, one policy isn't going to stop every scenario. The other conservative thing is put more cops in schools or armed teachers.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah, but they were. I mean, there's an SRO there.
I'm probably. I don't necessarily like that. I don't want to live in a police state. I don't know that I want armed cops roaming the halls. All due respect to law enforcement, but you're cops. And it's. I mean, that's like trying to kill a gnat with a hammer. Anyway, the point is, I think you and I are trying to debate this in good faith, right? Like, I don't think you're out to grab my guns. You don't think I'm out to let school children get murdered. But yet we look at the larger, and how unhelpful it is to have certain Republican senators, certain Democratic senators just get up and immediately start grandstanding on this, immediately start sticking their fingers in the eyes of the people on the other side. I'm not saying that you can't talk about it, but, Senator Murphy last night, his speech on the Senate floor was so unhelpful. Do you think that persuaded a single Republican? Do you think there was a single Republican in that chamber thinking, I'm more likely to come over and support you now that you're raking me over the coals?
But Senator Murphy represents the state that had Newtown. He's experienced this. He's been working on, I saw an interview with him this morning where he was responding to that sort of criticism. And he said, I work on reducing violence with guns every single day. Every single day, I'm talking to my Republican colleagues. It's not just when there's a shooting. He's working on it every day. Here's the deal. I needed to hear his speech yesterday. I needed to know that somebody's trying to do something about this. Because so help me God, if I see another tweet from a Republican politician who's saying thoughts and prayers, how can this happen?
Sure. Go ahead.
How can this happen?
Go ahead and keep dunking on the Republicans then, and see how many people you persuade. They put out thoughts and prayers, and then you dunk on them for doing it, and then they're more likely to come around to your side, Chad.
Well, no, I understand, trying to bring people to your side. But there also has to be a level of frustration. I saw a clip this morning it was Bill Clinton, George Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, and literally like their speeches are over the top of, how can we let this happen? Whatever. Well, damn it, do something. Try to do something. I mean, what we know for sure is what's happening in our policies aren't doing anything to prevent these shootings that are happening weekly, it seems like. Try something.
Okay, but the problem is you're
offended by Chris Murphy's speech, and therefore you're not going to help kids not get shot in schools.
But that assumes that the policy that Chris Murphy's supporting is going to stop kids from getting shot in school, and I'm not convinced that it would.
But if we just sit back and say we're going to do nothing because we don't know everything's going to be a perfect policy to fix every scenario, we're going to stay in this situation.
All right.
We need to do something.
You're not going to persuade me. I am never going to support a law because it's a do something law. You have to demonstrate to me that it's going to work. That you've got to convince me. I'm sorry. I'm not in favor of putting laws on the books just to try crap out. I'm not. You are dealing with a civil right that is enshrined in the Second Amendment of the Constitution. I don't treat that cavalierly.
Well, then we're going to have. So what you're saying is we should. No, okay, I'm going to back that up. Then we're accepting what's happening in Texas.
No,
I don't. I don't to try anything.
I didn't say I'm not willing to try anything. I'm saying the thing you propose.
What are conservative politicians bringing forward in order to do anything about this?
They
don't invest in mental health. They don't invest in schools. They don't want to do anything to control weapons getting in the hands of people who do this shit.
I think there's an argument to be made that we could be enforcing a lot of the laws that are already on the books. We don't enforce straw gun purchases very well, right? That's a law that's already on the books. It's already illegal to make a straw purchase for a firearm, and we don't enforce it very well. There's a whole, and I don't have the laundry list in front of me, but there's a lot we could do just enforcing what we already have. I think that's an area where liberals and conservatives could get together.
I agree. And then we need to invest in law enforcement so we can make sure we're doing all those things in addition to the 8 billion other things. But instead, we're spending time debating if teachers should be armed in schools.
I think that's silly. Yeah, this is a hard issue, isn't it?
It's a hard issue, and I don't know how it's not emotional.
Yeah.
I don't know how you look at those pictures of those kids and think about dropping off your kids or grandkids or seeing your neighborhood kids and not see their faces in these situations.
I do. I looked at the faces of those kids this morning. Some of those kids look like my son. That's hard. That's hard. But on the other side, like, it's a civil right, man. And we have laws. One of the things that frustrated me when we were having the red flag law debate at the national level, and Heidi Heitkamp was our senator at the time, and she was insisting that because no, it wasn't the red flag. She had an idea that we were going to ban gun sales to people who are on the no-fly list, right? But there's no due process for getting put on the no-fly list. You could be put on the no-fly list without even knowing you're on the no-fly list, right? And she was insisting that there was due process to this. And I'm thinking, again, this is a civil right. This is a civil right. And you're treating it so cavalierly that you could just put my name on a list and suddenly deny me my rights. That is not how things work. And it's not just a Second Amendment right. It's also a due process right. If the government's going to come and restrict my liberties, there has to be due process.
But where's the outcry when the do not fly list started? I mean, you're just talking about their ability to have weapons. Why is the Second Amendment so much more important than the other ones?
I don't think it is more important. I didn't like the no-fly list. I think there should be due process. If you're going to put somebody on the no-fly list, there should be due process. I'm consistent. Maybe other people aren't. I'm consistent about these things.
Yeah, I think your opinion is probably in the minority on do not fly and some of that stuff.
Probably. I remember when I was co-hosting for Scott Hennon having a 3-hour debate with them about this stuff and about whether or not Muslims should be allowed to build a mosque near ground zero. I was for that too because, hey, you know what? The First Amendment counts for them too.
Or at least it should.
It should. It doesn't always, unfortunately. But this is such a... It's an intractable issue, but I do think, like, I don't think the cause is helped by Hollywood celebrities coming out. I mean, you say, the thoughts and prayers, like we're going to dunk on Republicans for that. How about we dunk on Steve Kerr from coming out and saying the same stupid flippant things and being indignant and turning a bunch of people off, right? I mean, it's so... if you're going to treat the people you need to agree with you like they're evil, they're never going to agree with you.
Listen, I'm not in the business of going after somebody whose father was shot and murdered through gun violence and telling him how he should feel when he sees people get shot. I'm telling
him that if he really wants things to change, he should think about how he's speaking.
So, but Rob, there has been no indication that the Republican caucus in Washington has any interest in doing anything on gun violence.
I don't think that's true. I think there are conservative Republican senators who are talking about enforcing the laws already on the books. They have ideas. They're just not a lot of times the ideas Democrats want to hear.
Well, I'm not familiar with any of them. The only person I'm aware of who sat in a room and actually done something is Pat Toomey, and he's retiring.
Marco Rubio has spoken a lot about it. I think even Ted Cruz, when it comes to some of the enforcement stuff, he's been out there on it. Mike Lee. It exists. But again, it gets lost in this maelstrom of recrimination because, Chris Evans is writing profanity on Twitter. And so the journalists are covering that. And we can't have a debate about it because it's all colored by that nonsense.
Yeah, but it's also colored by the nonsense of Governor Abbott a few years ago tweeting out, in Texas, anybody can have a gun. You don't need to have a background check. You don't need to take any tests and whatever. What a great place. And then he questions why this kind of stuff is happening. If everybody has a gun and they have and part of it comes down to valuing life, right? We don't value, and maybe I'm getting now into something much bigger than I should, but there's something, this doesn't happen other places. We have mental illness in other places. The only difference is the access to weapons. And I don't care if you're going hunting. I don't know anybody who hunts with an AR-15 or needs high-capacity magazines or bump clips or whatever the next thing is. Everybody keep your guns that are used for sports or even personal protection.
That's not what the Second Amendment says. We don't have the Second Amendment for hunting, or not just for hunting.
But then, so why don't we have people who have tanks driving down. I mean, there has to be a limit on these things, and we have put limits in place. Grenade launchers.
We just disagree on where those limits should be.
Sure.
And owning a gun is purchasing a gun, owning a gun. I mean, in the past, it's been a very, very difficult thing to do, and yeah, it's a tough issue. Well, the one argument I think holds, and actually Mother Jones of all publications has done a lot of work about the influence, like the idea of the mass shooting as a medium for expression, right? And they tie like how many of the mass shootings were influenced by Columbine. And the connections where people like a lot of the shooters became fascinated with it. They bought books about it. They watched it. And it almost seems like I really agree with this, that this is a way for people who are whatever they're motivated by. I mean, sometimes it's bigotry, sometimes it's mental illness, sometimes it's some personal vendetta, whatever it is. When the disaffected want to express themselves in America, increasingly, that's through the medium of the mass shooting. And I struggle with that because I think it's accurate. I think it's probably one of the best explanations we have for why this keeps happening. And it's a lot better than just we have guns, therefore it happens. I don't think people commit crimes because they have guns. I think they use guns to commit crimes that they've already established. And I think in America, a lot of it's driven by this sort of viral effect of the mass shooting. Now, you tell me the law we could pass to address that, because I don't know what it is. I'm really interested in it, and I'm wide open to it, but I don't know what we do.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting is how the media is covering these things these days. I don't know if you've noticed, but the shooter, his picture hasn't been anywhere. I think the media has made a conscious effort to sort of downplay the celebrity of the mass shooter.
I think
Absolutely,
that's very smart. Because in the past, we turned them into almost, much like we did with serial killers, them into almost cult-like figures. And that, I think, contributed a lot to inspiring future events.
And I think you often see like this, a rash of copy. Maybe it's not copycat because they're not the same thing, but it just seems like these sometimes come in cycles. Like Buffalo happened a week ago, California was before that, and they just sort of happen right after
part of the research that I'm talking about, where they called them aftershocks, right? Where you have the main event, and then you have aftershock. They could go and they could track that maybe didn't have as big a body count, didn't get as much media coverage, but they could track it. Like one happens, and then there's aftershocks. So maybe this one was an aftershock of Buffalo. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I will tell you, like, just from a personal level, these school ones affect me way more, right? I mean, you think about Buffalo, and there was, I think, 10 people got shot there. It's at a grocery store, but man, you see those kids.
I just don't know how we protect our society without trying to turn ourselves into a police state, and not just from guns. I mean, if they didn't have access to guns, you can drive a car into a. You see the grocery store at 5:30 on a weekday, and people are getting off work and they're rushing in there to get their groceries. I mean, how easy would it be to plow a truck into them? All right. I mean,
and obviously we can't protect ourselves from every scenario where crazy people do crazy things. But if we could limit the amount of damage somebody could do, I'm all for that.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the initiated measure that failed. Another one. The Secretary of State kept off the ballot. Now this one, when they turned in their signatures and I saw that they were only a couple of thousand above the threshold, I was thinking already like, oof. And then if you read down in the Secretary of State's letter where he kept them off, their estimate was like over 33,000. They actually only had like 31,600. And that was like just a few hundred above the 31,000 whatever that was required. So even before they started getting rid of signatures, they had a problem.
Rob, could you imagine spending $559,000 or whatever they spent and getting this as a result? I mean, I don't know. It just seems like McFeely's got a column up that goes after them pretty hard for being no different than sort of the Fargo school board folks or the term limit folks or whatever. But it seems like amateur hour for a bunch of people who should be pros.
I spoke to Jeff Zarling, and he didn't get into specifics with me. Jeff Zarling he's from Williston. He was one of the organizers of the campaign. He mentioned the possibility, he alluded to possible litigation coming up, that they're going to try to hold some people that they worked with accountable. I don't know the merits of that. I don't have a lot of details on that. The other thing that he said is that, I mean, how frustrated they were. Because if you think about it, like you hire, like say you go out and you hire some people to collect signatures for you. The only way to ensure that there is, like, if you duplicate their work, right? Like if you go back through and you call every person, right, and say, did you really sign this, right? Or if you look through every signature, like which
or if you have a voter file that you have to, check if they're a real person or not.
Right. So, you almost have to end up, having to redo the work that they did in the first place, which defeats the purpose of hiring them.
It almost makes it seem like it's not that easy to change the Constitution for people who think it's too easy to change the Constitution.
I think it's pretty easy if you have enough money. Granted, they spent $559,000, but they
so $500,000 clearly isn't enough to change the Constitution. And that's before the campaign starts, Rob.
There's some competency issues here. I do think this process is still ripe for change. It is a stupid way to make law. And it's executed stupidly, often by stupid people, and it needs to stop. I think, but I realize that this is a pipe dream of mine that we're going to get rid of the initiated measure process. I do think we need reform, and I can't. I want to throw things through a window when people start beating their chests like this is the people speaking. No, what's been exposed this cycle is there's a lot of deep-pocketed people. Now they've exposed themselves through their own incompetency, but that's all it is. It's the same.
Rob,
it's the same political interests that are lobbying at the legislature.
Tell me you can at least see the humor in the group of people who are saying it's too easy to change the Constitution.
There is some
not
irony
being
there.
able to change the Constitution.
There is some irony
because
there.
They had fraudulent signatures. I mean, it's too good. It's too good.
There is some irony there. It is pretty good. It is still a terrible. I think, honestly, both of these, the term limits measure, this measure, the one that was kept off by the Supreme Court last cycle, I think it proves my point. This is a stupid process, and we ought to, at the very least, make very, very big reforms to it.
And Rob, I think it proves the point that the system works.
Sure.
Kudos to Al Jagger. I mean, Al Jagger is on his game this
we shouldn't
year.
We shouldn't have to rely on the forbearance of election officials to make sure that these things are done right.
What else do they have to do? What are you talking about?
Well, I don't know. They're certainly not enforcing corporate donations because I just had a story about Minot's mayoral race. And by the way, as we were talking, the mayor of Minot, Sean Sitma, texted me and said he's going to return the donation to the corporation. Corporations aren't allowed to make donations to political candidates. He's going to return the one from the corporation that was just before his city council seeking a TIF district that he voted for. So
do you remember the John Hoven Burlington Northern thing from back in the early 2000s, where he had a fundraiser on a Burlington Northern car, and Democrats accused him of taking an illegal in-kind corporate contribution, and his treasurer then wrote a backdated check to Burlington Northern, and then it all came out that it was fraudulent, that she backdated it. She had to resign, and there's a press conference, and we've got the one law in North Dakota campaign finance: just don't take corporate money.
There's no limit to how much you can donate, which I agree with, right? It's very open. But the one restriction I do agree with is we don't need corporations giving money to candidates.
Or union dues, for that matter.
Or unions.
We can't spend union dues on contributions.
Nor should we be able to. Also, especially when sometimes union dues, not everybody agrees with their union dues, but there's a whole galaxy of legal precedent and everything.
Rob, luckily the Supreme Court got rid of that thing where you have to join your union.
Thank goodness. It should be a choice. I think it should always be a choice.
It's always been in North Dakota. So,
it always has been. That's true.
And I don't think they're changing it anytime soon, Rob.
No, I don't think so. Well, especially not when you look at when the Supreme Court's striking it down. So that was interesting. I guess another initiated measure bites the dust. What are we left with? The marijuana folks, right? They're the last ones.
Yeah, and they're still out there collecting signature. And if I'm them, I'm looking at these last two results, and I'm doing my due diligence to make sure my signatures are good.
That'd be something if a third one goes down. I'll be doing a little dance. As much as I want, and I say that I want recreational marijuana to pass. I may even sign the ballot measure. I don't like the initiated measure process, but it's the way the game's played right now. I would get rid of it but I would probably sign that measure. But I would laugh if they were kept off too, and I would continue my calls for reforming this very, very stupid way to make law.
And again, kudos to Al Jagger. He is no lame duck in that office. He's working until the end here.
Yeah, he is. He is taking stance. He's facing down my favorite thing is when the term limits people went out and hired a Trump lawyer, right? Who was filing filing lawsuits trying to overturn the 2020 election. And I was just thinking, as a citizen, I'm thinking, for crying out loud, just own what you did and move on. As a political writer, I'm like, oh yes.
Well,
delicious.
So we had fraudulent signatures with those. We had a county commissioner in Burleigh County, Mark Armstrong, who evidently turned in fraudulent signatures.
We had the Fargo school board recalls, which were problematic. Last cycle, we had the folks who circulated the election. Election reform would have made all sorts of changes to the state election law. They were kept off by the state Supreme Court. What else was there? I mean, there was. It seems to me like there's another one I'm forgetting too. Way back when there was a pharmacy measure that was kept off. That was years ago now. I think that was like 2006.
Well, and then the NDSU football one.
Oh, that's right, 2012. Well. Which, by the way, the legislature made some of this stuff a felony. So I think that's the other step in the process. If maybe you and I can agree on that. Let's enforce that law. If people are out there messing around with the signatures, hold them accountable. Charge them with a felony.
And no matter if it's a candidate petition or initiated measure petition, if you're lying to the government,
if you're playing games with this process, right?
Right on.
I think you and I can agree it's a very important process, like amending the Constitution or referring a candidate to the ballot or even putting a candidate on the ballot is a very, very serious thing. Should be taken seriously.
Absolutely.
And if you defraud that process, you should face a serious consequence, a felony. I think that's absolutely.
Yeah. And again, I can't get over the fact that that the folks who wanted to change the Constitution because it's too easy failed because of fraud.
Well, it is. I am not without some I don't know what you call it, admiration. I recognize the irony. I too had a little bit of a laugh at it. All right, Chad, that's it for this week. What are we talking about next week? I think I already booked it. Oh, we're gonna have the new ACLU guy on.
Cody Schuler.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I have a love-hate relationship with the ACLU, as you can imagine.
Don't we all?
We'll get into it next week. Chad, until then.
Thanks, Rob.
Want more political news like this? Visit inforum.news/port to get 3 months of unlimited access to our news network for only 99 cents a month. Don't wait. Get this limited time offer at inforum.news/port now.